There are lots of ways to think about All Saints' Day. Let me if you want to think about it, just consider the possibilities of, say, the stained glass. I know it's a little dark outside now to enjoy the stained glass, but you see images of saints, women and men, who are examples to us in faith and remind us about the possibilities that are there for us to live lives that will have us, say, recognized as saints too. Paths and examples of people to follow. That's great. It's a good thing for us to hang on to. I'd like you to consider maybe just a little different thing. It's got to do with the calendar, but it's also got to do with recognizing people. Consider the possibility that All Saints' Day is a day that you can think about how we recognize and honor all those folks who've been recognized by the church as saints. Okay? And there's quite a number of them. But there's also the sense, too, about All Souls' Day, the day that follows, all those folks who are not recognized by the church. I mean, you're thinking, well, what does that mean? I know just among Irish people, there's a certain cliche. People talk about, say, oh, there's sainted grandmother or there's sainted mother. You kind of know intuitively just by looking at someone by virtue of, say, the way they live their lives, their prayerfulness, their holiness, their sense of open-heartedness, and their generosity, and their expression of faith. You'd say, hey, if they aren't saints, what hope is there for the rest of us? But I'd like to consider the possibility, too, that there's lots of room for saints. I mean, let's be fair. Saints are not called to be perfect people. Hey, think about the disciples and the many times they messed up along the way. Jesus always cared for them, and the church has declared them saints. If there's hope for the disciples, hey, we're in good company. There's hope for us, too. Because we're not called to be perfect, but we're called to live to the best of our ability and follow the ways that are outlined by all the good gifts that God has given us. We have a chance to live those out, make them come alive. In other words, to live lives in as holy a way as we can. And I know, let's say, I've heard someone else once say, being holy, well, hey, doesn't it remind you, let's say, the images of little holy cards, of saints? All those saints who look very, very, say, hungry or thirsty or kind of emaciated in that kind of art. Isn't it interesting the way we often portray saints as being very, very, say, flat and one-dimensional and lacking in joy and lacking in spirit? Saints are filled with holiness. Holiness speaks to spirit and joy. Holiness speaks to how we share, how we give freely. Holiness speaks to so many things that are in the heart for us. Holiness speaks to so many, say, gospel virtues that we read every Saturday, every Sunday, on weekends in our parishes all around the network that talk about the ways of Jesus. We can do this too, because we too are called to share in holiness. If you're looking for a little more of a contemporary example, the experience from the Second Vatican Council. One of the documents is called Lumen Gentium. Lumen Gentium speaks about the universal call to holiness. We are all called to receive God's gifts, all called to act upon those gifts and to live them out for the greater glory of God and for the love of our sisters and brothers in Christ. So this is something we can all do too. We have the chance to be saints. We have the chance to live this out by following the ways of Jesus, looking to the examples of the saints that are around us, whether they're declared by the church or they're not declared by the church, but we know them to be people of great holiness and great following the ways of Christ. May we take into consideration the ways in which we can live this out and fill the world with God's gift and grace and joy and faith and peace by the ways in which we take all that God has given us and make it come alive. These are ways to make holiness come alive. These are ways for us to honor the saints. These are ways for us to share in that destiny, life, death, and new life, life as one of God's sainted people.